Hello one and all, Jasper here, and I have to say, this season is really sapping away my strength. As I mentioned in the last video, I try not to repeat inaccuracies that were started in previous episodes, as that's just beating a dead horse, and it's redundant. But I have to say, I still feel them when we get to them. And the podcast I do with DJ Fella is making it very difficult to ignore them. So, I want to be clear that just because I may have less and less to comment in these videos, I'm still very much aware of what has come before and how it's affecting each future episode. Either way, I won't have as much to comment in regards to changes in this episode. In fact, we need to skip to the small council meeting before I feel the need to correct something. Sir Alfred comments that they had lost their largest dragon in regards to Maylis dying at Rook's Rest. Rhaenys also said the same thing in the previous episode, but I didn't think much of it. But there is a chance that this is inaccurate. We don't know the exact times these dragons were born, but the earliest mention of Maylis is in 75 AC, while Caraxes is mentioned in 72 AC, and usually the elder dragon is older, and so if Caraxes was mentioned before, chances are he is older and thus would be bigger. I have more evidence of this, however. It is also mentioned that Maylis was one of the swiftest dragons, specifically being swifter than Caraxes, and normally the larger the dragon is, the less swift they are. We see the Brackens treating with Daemon and the Blackwoods. Presumably, this is Amos Bracken, who, as mentioned before, should have died at the Battle of the Burning Mill. They tell Daemon to piss off, and I have to say, was I the only one who thought that Daemon was just about to burn that guy alive right then and there? Either way, since it is confirmed later in the episode, I can finally say that Daemon took the seat of House Bracken much more quickly in the books. Right after the Battle of the Burning Mill, specifically using his dragon and the Riverlords in the area who declared for the Blacks, he just took it when there was no one there to defend it. Hostages were made of those still inside before the Bracken army could return. The bastard half-brother of Amos, Rhaelon Rivers, was the one now leading the army and surrendered to save his kin. This pretty much cemented the Riverlands in the hands of Team Black, as any of the other houses who swore to the Greens switched sides soon after. I have somewhat been refraining from making comments on the Riverlands to avoid spoilers for y'all, but I have to say, they are dragging their feet in regards to Daemon and the Riverlands. How many dreams do we need to see to get that he's losing his mind? I would much rather see other characters get some development, such as Jace and especially Helena. Suffice it to say, because of this, much of what we see here is not accurate to the books. The Blackwoods being needlessly cruel to the Brackens to get them to surrender, the Riverlords arriving at Harrenhal to voice their displeasure at these barbaric acts, none of it happened. Now, jumping over some other stuff, we arrive at the small council meeting in King's Landing, where Alicent nominates herself to be the regent while Aegon is incapacitated, stating that she served as regent for her husband Viserys. In the books, Viserys had no regent during his reign, as his afflictions were very different from what the show portrays. But even then, Alicent being regent seems unlikely, as Otto would probably be the more likely choice, given he was Hand of the King. Though, queen regents are not rare. Cersei was queen regent, Lysa was regent over the Vale when her husband died, and even in the time of A Dance of Dragons, the Vale and Reach were ruled by female regents because their sons were too young to lead. In the books, there is no discussion on who should be regent. Kristen pretty much tells Aemon that he has to do it, and he accepts very quickly. Also, in the show, the motivation for her not being chosen is a little weak. The main reason is that she is a woman and Aemon is the heir and male, which yes, I get it, we're in a patriarchy, yada yada yada, sexism dumb, but the fact no one points out that Alicent hasn't demonstrated at all that she is a capable leader, while Aemon at the very least was responsible in a mostly successful plan in defeating the Blacks, and that the injuries of Aegon were arguably from his poor choices rather than anything Aemon did. The council continues on as we slowly zoom in onto Alicent, and we can hear Aemon making some decisions, such as closing the gates so that none can leave King's Landing. In the books, this was done by Alicent before any regent was named. However, I question this choice in the show continuity, as since there is a lack of food for the small folk, letting them out would prove to be safer in general. In the books, there is no lack of food. The sea snake blockade still exists and does good in harming the trade of the financial aspect to King's Landing, but there was still food. After all, it was only blocked by sea. They still had a decent size of the continent to provide food for them. In the books, the people want to leave King's Landing solely because of the dragon head that was paraded through the streets, scaring them shitless and not wanting to be in King's Landing when shit hits the fan. Also, we can play a little catch-up here with Jace, who is in the Twins seeking to earn their support. In the books, the Freys were one of the first ones to declare for the Blacks, and even aided Daemon in taking Stonehenge, so naturally there was no dealing such as this at all. Back in Driftmark, we see Baela Targaryen present Corlys with the Hand of the King pin, saying that Rhaenyra was the one to name him. In the books, after the death of Rhaenys, Corlys was ready to call it quits and pull his support from her, until he is named hand by Jace, not Rhaenyra. Corlys also asks Baela to be his heir, which, what the fuck are you smoking? You were talking about how Rhaena and Joffrey knowing nothing of the sea was such an issue. Baela also knows jack shit about the sea, yet you're willing to name her? Not to mention, for someone who cares so much about names, you seem pretty quick in naming someone as your heir, which could result in Driftmark becoming the lands to the Targaryens instead of the Velaryons. Fucking hell, why do these writers keep doing Corlys so dirty? Next scene, we have Rhaenyra sending Sir Alfred off to Harrenhal to keep an eye on Daemon to make sure he is acting in accordance to his queen. In the books, this did not happen. Sir Alfred remained at Dragonstone for the entirety of his story. And the final scene we need to go over is the last one of the episode, when Rhaenyra and Jace seem to hatch a plan in looking for dragon riders to mount those who rest in Dragonstone. According to the books, this idea comes from Jace wanting to attack King's Landing with the dragons they have while Vhagar is injured from the previous battle. How this plan would go is up in the air. The 3 dragons would be his own, Vermax, his mother on Syrax, and Daemon on Caraxes, and the only real threat to Vhagar would be Caraxes. Syrax and Vermax would be almost inconsequential in the battle, so I wouldn't call it a good idea. However, apparently Mushroom told him to slow down and gave him the idea that they should look for those who have the blood of old Valyria and give them the chance to mount the dragons. How does this play out? Well, we can find that out in the next episode. Until then, be safe, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.